Welcome to this week's lecture on the lab. So this is week 5, so we're going to be talking about what you're going to be doing for week 5's lab. Last week we worked on the project. So last week we concentrated on the building description. This week we're moving to area number 2. So the project area this week is utility analysis. Now this should be a little easier for you this week because we spent the first 2 weeks of this class dealing solely with utilities. So it should make it easier. So, as sort of a little bit of a reminder, utility analysis really covers 2 key areas. We have individual billing analysis. We check for simple mistakes. We check for proper billing rate or tariffs. And we check for proper exemption, in this case sales tax exemption. That would be under individual billing. Under billing history, we have to establish the energy utilization index. We have to compare with the commercial building energy consumption survey if possible. And then we have to compare current annual heating degree days with the consumption of gas, natural gas. So those are the 3 key areas that we usually work on. Now it's important to remember when we actually do a write-up on utility, just like building description, one thing I failed to mention last time is every time you run into something, this area, which is really part of the data collection area, when you're doing the write-up, you also have to explain to the owner or operator of the building, facility management person, whoever you're doing this energy audit for, you have to take a little time ahead of time to actually describe what you're dealing with. So in this case, before we actually get into the analysis, we actually have to explain a lot of the things that you guys learned about utility billing early on. So if this particular customer is on a demand-based rate, we have to go through and describe what the difference between consumption and demand is. So there's a little bit of education. It goes into the write-up. If you start talking about organizations that they're not familiar with, don't simply write them in the document. You have to explain them first when you run into them. Anyway, so let's take a look. The first area, individual billing. First of all, make sure you have all the utility bills. If the customer is a retail open access, in other words, they're taking advantage of unregulated or deregulated utility structures, then they may have 2 bills for the same utility. So they may have 2 electric bills, they may have 2 gas bills, one from a supplier and one for the local delivery. So make sure you have all the utility bills. Make sure you have at least 1 consecutive year's worth of billing of all fuels used. Now, it doesn't matter when the year starts as long as you have 12 consecutive months. But it's also important to realize that the months between the bills should also line up. So, for example, if I have a January 2014 electric bill and I go through them and I have all the way through December of 2014, then I better have the same January 14 through December 14 of natural gas. So I need to have the months line up. It's not uncommon for building owners when they give you a package of bills, utility bills, that they're missing some. They don't have them all. Somebody threw them away. They got filed in the wrong place. It's not uncommon to not have all the bills. But it's absolutely crucial that when we start setting up baselines that we have at least at minimum 1 consecutive year or 12 consecutive months of utility bills and that all the sources of energy line up between those bills. So step 1, if we look at an individual bill, we need to determine if the utility bill I'm looking at matches the meter in the building. Now note, this can get complicated if the building has more than 1 meter. Are Are they being billed correctly? It all starts with the meter. It's not uncommon, or I've actually caught in the past, buildings in an industrial complex that were so close together that people were paying each other's utility bills. They were actually wrong meter for the wrong building. So make sure the meter on the building and the meter on the bill line up. Step 2, check the utility bills for tax exempt status. Does this match the function of the building, at least as far as you know? A lot of times the owner can give you information on this. So the owner may come right out and say they applied for state and federal tax exempt status because they're not for profit. And if they are, if that's true, then state sales tax should not show up on the utility bill. Now it gets really complicated if you have a multifunction building. You have a building owner that either leases sublet space out, and the building owner themselves have some sort of tax exempt status, but this doesn't automatically make the lease spaces tax exempt. So I may lease my building out, part of my building that I don't need, to a retail outlet. Well, the retail outlet has to pay state sales tax. They don't get to take on my not-for-profit status. So I have to be careful when we're looking at multi-purpose or multifunction buildings. Step 3, check the current tariff for what the building is on. What type is it? Could there be a better tariff? It's easy to go out in this day and age and download the current electric rates, natural gas rates, whatever, from the local utility company. These tariffs go through a detailed line item of what different tariffs are being charged for, including what the qualifications are for you to be eligible to be on that tariff. Now, if they don't have this, you can always contact your local energy provider and ask for a copy of the tariffs. Another way of doing this or checking is you can ask the utility company, one of their public service or customer service reps, to actually run the building in question on a number of other tariffs that this customer may qualify for. Now, in my case, I'll get a tariff sheet, I'll set up my own spreadsheet, and I'll run the comparison myself. Again, it depends on where you want to lay the liability. I may do it to start with, and if it looks like it's feasible that the owner will save money on a different tariff, I'll get a hold of the customer rep for the utility company and have them run it. So all of a sudden the liability falls at the utility company's realm. On the utility history side, all of a company's utility billing should be put in some sort of utility analysis spreadsheet. In this case, I have attached one to this lab, so I have a detailed utility history spreadsheet built. It's very similar to the one you used week 1 for the EUI, except it gives you a little more detailed information. When you're done, it'll actually, as long as you type in the information correct, it'll actually give you information that will be valuable to plug into the carrier HAP program at that point in time that we do the load calculation. So step 1, you'll take the actual project utility billing and enter the appropriate values into the spreadsheet. In this step, you'll end up calculating an EUI, and you'll also calculate some information that will be valuable to be plugged into the carrier HAP program, which is next week's lab. And again, when you're actually putting in this billing information into this utility spreadsheet, make sure that you've already lined up the appropriate 12 months that you're going to use to set as a baseline. So make sure you wade through all the bills beforehand and cherry pick the bills that line up before you start plugging stuff into the spreadsheet. And again, this spreadsheet works just like the spreadsheet from week 1. I made sure that I colored in the cells that you're to fill in. The cells are yellow. Don't do anything with the non-filled in cells because they have calculations in them. Step 2. This is the comparison part of your process. You're going to compare your building with the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, also something that you did week 1. Now, again, this is if it's possible. Some buildings have too many functions to be classified. Now, I still could go out to the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, and instead of using the function, the line item above the function categories is simple square footage. I could take the square footage of the building and the appropriate climatic zone and sort of get a rough idea of the function of my square, how my building compares with similar buildings of that square footage. Not a great comparison because obviously a warehouse uses a lot less energy than a bakery or high energy, hospital, whatever. But again, if I have multiple functions in a building, it's one more method that I can sort of get a handle on how's this building doing compared to the outside world. In step 3, final step, you'll evaluate the actual building usage of natural gas, or CCF, with the corresponding heating degree days for that month. So there'll be a gas usage. We apply the appropriate heating degree day for that month. If a building's using gas for heating, then the amount should track with the heating degree day over the course of the year. So if an owner tells me up front that, wow, we only use our natural gas for heating, then there should be a correlation between heating degree days and gas usage. If I find out there's not a correlation, if I plot that chart out and all of a sudden gas usage goes up when the temperature outside is going the other direction, then I know that there must be somewhere in the plant that natural gas is being used for some other reason. So that's the reason we use utility history from that standpoint. Now in this week's lab, this is a 2-part lab. Part 1 is individual billing. Part 2 is historical building. You have 2 basic items. You have the lab, which is in a form format, similar to what you've been filling out, and you have a spreadsheet. Using the actual Artworks utility billing, you're going to answer questions and fill out the spreadsheet. So you have the actual project buildings utility billing. Now I should emphasize, these are the actual bills that they gave us. This isn't something that I went through and cherry-picked stuff for you. This is stuff that they gave us. So you're using the actual real McCoy from a building owner. Now, both the form and the spreadsheet, once you get them filled out, you'll save each of the files with your name involved somehow in the file name, and you'll attach it back to me for grading within this lab assignment. Now, before we proceed, what I want to do is go out and look at, first of all, this is an example of a heating degree day versus natural gas usage, CCF. Now, if you notice, this customer said that they only use the natural gas in their building for heating. Well, somebody plotted the gas usage with the heating degree days over the course of the year, the 1 year that we looked at, and they both track identical. I mean, they really track very well together. So that simply confirms something that the building owner had told us. If somehow we notice some huge one line going one way, one line going the other, we didn't see a correlation, then we have difference in what the building owner is telling us and something happening within the plant. Maybe there's a process going on that the customer forgot to tell us about. Anyway, it's something that we need to look at. The other thing I wanted to show you is quickly the spreadsheet that you're going to be working with this week. This is my utility cost analysis spreadsheet. If you look at the bottom, there's 3 different worksheets. There's a detailed worksheet, That's where you put in all the utility bills. There's a tariff comparison, where I have one specific tariff that's related to the building you guys are working on, and then an automatic heating degree day versus the gas consumption. So the first thing you'll be doing is taking the utility bills and filling out the yellow on this. So you need the conditioned square footage for artworks. You need to look at the utility bills and put the access charges on. Those are the flat rates for the billing. What that's meant for is it'll eventually calculate some numbers that are important for HAP. The electrical kilobtu is a fixed value. Natural gas is either going to be 100 BTU unless it says otherwise on the utility bill. You're going to fill in the month year. In other words, the cherry-picked 12 consecutive months of utility for both the electric and gas. You're going to fill in the kilowatt hours and the cost. That's the total bill. It'll calculate the kilobtus for you. You fill in the total CCF used per month and the cost for that. It'll calculate the kilobtu. Then it's going to calculate total electric kilobtus, total gas kilobtus, the total kilobtus. It'll calculate the EUI. It'll calculate the cost of electricity, the cost of gas, and then the cost per kWh for the HAP program, the hourly analysis program. It'll calculate the cost for CCF for the HAP program. These two values will be moved forward into the next section of the project. And then finally, the total cost of utilities. We can use this number to confirm that our HAP program next week actually is functioning correctly. So did we recreate this building accurately? Can we mimic the actual annual utility bill? Now, other tabs. This comparison in here, all it's really needed is we added the month, the electrical use from the customer's bill. The monthly demand was predicted by the HAP program, and it actually runs through a different tariff. Now, the customer that I was comparing with happened to be on a consumption bill. This is a demand-based bill. At the bottom, it rattled through all the numbers, and when it came down, the customer was currently paying at the bottom under the electrical general secondary, well, the customer was paying the secondary rate commercial. This is a simple consumption rate. They're paying $15.0339, and when I ran it through the demand rate, it dropped their amount down to $14.5588. This is a savings of $47.51 for just 1 month. If I could repeat this for a number of months, it would give me enough information to make a recommendation back to the customer to have a customer service rep at the utility company formally check historically the owner's use of electricity to see if this would be a better rate to be on. And then finally, the heating degree days. These will self-populate as you put the stuff in from the detailed utility. These two columns will populate themselves. I gave you the heating degree days for the location. Once you fill this in, it'll generate this chart. So you have pretty much everything that you need. Now this ends Lab Lecture 5. When you're ready, you can proceed to Lab 5. Thank you.